The otherworldly cry jolted Adira from her nightmare. Her gaze shot to the white curtains billowing along the balcony that overlooked the rocky cliff face. For a moment, Adira lingered in her bed. She cocked her head, straining to discern if the sound she'd heard had been real or a remnant of a dream that was more memory than imagining. The thundering waterfalls clogged her ears, almost deafening. Then she heard it. Another mighty shriek. Adira threw back the satin sheets and stumbled to the marble floor. She tripped on her way up, and her heart fluttered as she looked to the morning skyline just outside her bedroom. She tore past the curtains and rammed her belly against the balcony railing and stretched over the edge, eyes darting in all directions to locate the source of the noise. A cool mist wafted from the falls towering beside her room. They emptied into a plunging river gorge beneath the arcane order, which was carved 1,000 paces above the earth into the leeward side of the mountain. This perched temple was her home, a garden of stone and cascading water, disturbed only by the winding paths cut along treacherous cliff edges. Adira craned her head sideways toward the reception pavilion. Where had the mysterious roars come from? Her eyes fell upon the gleaming granite courtyard, which sparkled in the late spring sunshine. Worthy supplicants were ported there to petition the arcane order's services. The creatures filling the open area made it appear like a tablecloth a trio of elephants were trying to make a stage of. Adira's eyes widened. Dragons. 3 dragons crowded the yard. 2 of the order's adjuncts huddled beneath the shelter of the pavilion as the dragons snapped at one another. The beasts seemed more agitated than intent on making a meal of Adira's order mates. The sight of them cowering made Adira purse her lips. Her shoulders eased. Perhaps she too should have been afraid. Dragons were on her doorstep after all. Surely that was the reasonable reaction. But as she stared down at the scaly beasts, all she felt was excitement. The blaring call of a horn split through the mountain spires. Guards streamed down the cliff-face paths like an army of ants answering their queen's call. Adira's grip on the banister tightened. Just as a whimper rose from her throat, the 3 dragons turned to face the threat coming toward them. Adira tilted her head and blinked. A man rode atop each of the 3 dragons. These beasts were not wild, and they hadn't come here by accident. She stood with her gaze glued to the 3 men on dragons, as the order's guards surrounded their mounts with spear points trained. Adira put a hand to her mouth. What would the dragon riders do next? What would her order mates do? If they meant to kill, they'd have brought Leander or Gretchen with them. There were mages with defensive skills ready at the upper guardhouse for sure. There would be another one close to the captain, who was taking a step forward to address the men on Dragonback even now. Adira's heart was hammering in her chest as 100 questions rose up like springtime lilies in her mind. As if dragons weren't mysterious enough. Men who rode them. She couldn't fathom it. She wouldn't be able to sleep again until she had answers, and she couldn't rely on anyone in the order to give her those answers. Not enough of them. Not all of them. She narrowed her eyes, squinting for a better view. The man answering the captain had auburn hair. He moved backward in his seat and seemed to fiddle around with something. His mount was a pale creature with wings, tail, and spikes, burnished black at the tips, as if he'd been burned around the edges by a candle. A very large candle. The moment the rider swung his leg over the saddle and made to go with the captain, Adira was decided. Turning, she bounded out of the warm sunlight and back into her room. The waterfall's mist had wet her bare feet, and she slipped her way past the bed and over to the armoire on the opposite side of the cavernous room. It was set into a shadowy alcove. Tapestries of painted silk hung on either side of the ostentatious piece. She threw open its ivory doors. Swathes of white fabric hung in the cabinet. Talmar always gave her white clothes. Against her snow-white skin and colourless eyes, he'd have her always looking like a ghost, a reminder of what she might as well be to the rest of the world. Or perhaps he simply didn't want her getting away with what she was about to do.